A breakthrough has emerged in the Lily and Jack Sullivan case. After 7 months of intensive investigation, after countless hours spent analyzing evidence and interviewing witnesses, after following every possible lead, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have made a significant discovery. New evidence has come to light that fundamentally changes our understanding of what happened to 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan on May 2, 2025. This isn't speculation or rumor. This is based on concrete forensic findings, witness testimony that's recently emerged, and investigative developments that bring us closer than ever to understanding the truth about what happened to these 2 innocent children who vanished from their rural Nova Scotia home. Before we reveal the shocking new evidence that's emerged and what it means for this case, you absolutely need to subscribe to the Case Files Collective right now and hit that notification bell. We've been covering cases like this from day one, bringing you the most in-depth analysis and the latest developments as they happen. Smash that like button and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from right now? The evidence that's been uncovered is shocking. It contradicts key elements of the story that Daniel Martell and Malia Brooks Murray have been telling for months. To understand the significance of this breakthrough, you need to know what was happening in the lives of Daniel Martell and Malia Brooks Murray in the weeks leading up to May 2, 2025. This wasn't a family living in peaceful harmony. This was a household under immense pressure, teetering on the edge of collapse, with cracks showing everywhere you looked. Daniel and Malia were raising Malia's 2 children from a previous relationship, Lily, 6 years old, and Jack, 4 years old. The children's biological father, Cody Sullivan, wasn't in the picture. He'd lost his parental rights due to his own issues and had no involvement in their daily lives. Daniel and Malia also had a baby daughter together named Meadow, who was about 1 year old at the time. It was a blended family situation that was buckling under financial devastation. The couple was drowning in debt, behind on rent, struggling to afford basic necessities for 3 children. Bill collectors were calling constantly. Eviction notices were piling up. The stress was suffocating, and it showed in every aspect of their lives. But the financial pressure was just one part of a much darker picture that was emerging. Teachers at the school Lily and Jack attended had been noticing troubling signs for weeks. Bruises on the children that raised questions. Behavior changes that worried staff members. One teacher had even filed a report with Child Protective Services in April, weeks before the children disappeared. The system, overwhelmed and understaffed like child welfare agencies everywhere, hadn't acted quickly enough. That report was still sitting in a queue when May 2 arrived. Neighbors in the rural Nova Scotia community had heard things too. Arguments coming from the Sullivan property. Sounds of conflict that carried across the open space between houses. On multiple occasions, neighbors reported hearing what sounded like children in distress. But like so many people, they didn't want to interfere, didn't want to make assumptions, convinced themselves it wasn't as bad as it might have sounded. Now they live with the regret of not acting on those concerns. May 1, 2025, at 2:25 in the afternoon. Security cameras at a Dollarama store in a neighboring town captured footage that would become crucial to this investigation. The grainy images showed Daniel Martell, Malia Brooks Murray, and 2 small children walking through the aisles, picking up items, going through the checkout line. It's mundane. Ordinary. A family on a routine shopping trip. But that footage represents something far more significant than anyone realized at the time. It's the last confirmed independent sighting of Lily and Jack Sullivan alive. After that timestamp, after 2:25 p.m. on May 1, there are no other witnesses who can verify the children were okay. No neighbors saw them playing outside. No friends stopped by for a visit. No relatives called to check in and speak with the kids. After that Dollarama security footage stopped recording, only 2 people could account for what happened to Lily and Jack, Daniel Martell and Malia Brooks Murray. Think about that timeline for a moment. From 2:25 p.m. on May 1 until 10:01 a.m. on May 2 when the 911 call was made reporting the children missing, that's nearly 20 hours. 20 critical hours where we have to rely entirely on the word of two people who investigators now believe have been lying from the very beginning. 20 hours where anything could have happened behind the closed doors of that isolated rural property. 20 hours that would change everything. What happened during those 20 hours? The evidence paints a chilling picture that contradicts everything Daniel and Malia have claimed. Technology that most people don't even think about, smart home devices quietly logging data in the background, has become a silent witness to what occurred in that house on the night of May 1st into the early morning of May 2nd. The Sullivan home had smart speakers and a smart thermostat, devices that automatically record certain events and activities. At 9:45 p.m. on the evening of May 1st, the smart speaker in the hallway near the children's bedrooms detected a sudden spike in noise. The sound level was high enough to trigger the device's logging threshold, meaning something loud and unusual happened at that moment. Then, for the next several hours, the data shows something equally disturbing: silence. Complete silence from the areas where Lily and Jack should have been sleeping. Normal household sounds continued in other parts of the house, but from the children's rooms, nothing. The smart thermostat data reveals behavior that investigators find impossible to explain with any innocent interpretation. At 10 p.m. on May 1st, someone turned the heat up dramatically. The temperature in the house was raised to approximately 82 degrees and kept there for several hours before being lowered back to normal around 4 a.m. This was late spring in Nova Scotia. Outside temperatures were mild. There's no reasonable explanation for cranking the heat that high in the middle of the night. Unless you're trying to accelerate something that benefits from warmth. Unless you're trying to speed up a process you desperately need to complete before morning comes. The children's electronic devices tell their own story. Lily and Jack both had tablets they used for games and educational content. The usage logs show consistent activity from both devices throughout the evening of May 1st, following their normal patterns. Then at approximately 8 p.m., both tablets went dark. No more activity. Nothing. If the children were alive and well through the evening and into the next morning as Daniel and Malia claimed, why didn't they use their tablets? These were young children who typically used their devices every evening until bedtime. The sudden cessation of all activity at 8:00 p.m. is anomalous and raises an obvious, terrible question: what prevented them from ever using their tablets again? The planning didn't start on May 1st. Evidence shows that what happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan was calculated, prepared for, researched in advance. Digital forensics revealed a trail of internet searches that demonstrate guilty knowledge and premeditation that's impossible to explain away. On April 27, 5 days before the children disappeared, Daniel Martell's browser history shows he searched for information about forensic science and investigation techniques. He wasn't looking at crime documentaries or entertainment content. He was researching how evidence gets collected at crime scenes, how investigations are conducted, what techniques police use to gather proof. On the same day, he searched for information about how long missing person investigations typically continue before resources are scaled back. These aren't casual searches. These are the searches of someone planning something and trying to understand how investigators would respond. Malia's search history is equally damning. On April 26, she researched cleaning products and their effectiveness at removing biological material. She looked up household chemicals and their properties, specifically focusing on what breaks down organic compounds. She searched for information about how missing person cases are investigated and what evidence investigators look for. 2 days later, on April 28, she placed an online order that would become a crucial piece of evidence: industrial-strength cleaning supplies from a bulk supplier. Not regular household cleaners you'd pick up at a grocery store. Professional-grade products designed for heavy-duty cleaning, the kind typically used by specialized cleaning services or crime scene remediation companies. Large quantities, far beyond what any normal household would need. The order confirmation recovered from her email account shows she paid extra for expedited delivery to ensure the products arrived before May 2. They were delivered on April 30, just 2 days before the children vanished. When investigators later asked Malia about this purchase, she claimed she was planning to do a deep cleaning of the house. But when police arrived on May 2, the house showed no signs of recent deep cleaning. So what were those industrial supplies actually used for? The answer seems obvious when you consider what forensic testing would later reveal. There's something else in Malia's digital activity that suggests advanced planning. On April 24, more than a week before the disappearance, she requested a schedule change at the retail store where she worked part-time. She specifically asked to have May 2 off, citing a family matter she needed to handle. Why would she need that specific day off? Why request it so far in advance? The timing suggests she knew something was going to happen on May 2, knew she'd need that day to report the children missing and deal with the investigation that would inevitably follow. When investigators first processed the Sullivan home on May 2, it appeared clean. Too clean, perhaps, for a house where 2 young children had been living. But investigators know that cleaning can hide evidence from the naked eye while leaving traces that science can still detect. They brought in luminol, a chemical that reacts with blood residue even after surfaces have been scrubbed and sanitized. What luminol revealed in that house was horrifying. In Jack's bedroom, luminol caused surfaces to glow with the unmistakable signature of blood. Not just a small spot that might be explained by a minor childhood injury, significant traces that indicated substantial bleeding had occurred in that room. The distribution pattern showed blood had been transferred to multiple surfaces, suggesting movement or struggle. Someone had cleaned extensively, but microscopic residue remained trapped in tiny crevices and porous materials that scrubbing couldn't reach. In the bathroom that Lily used, the same thing. Luminol revealed blood traces on the floor, on the lower portions of the wall, in the grout between tiles. Again, the pattern indicated more than a simple nosebleed or scraped knee. This was blood that had been spread across surfaces, then meticulously cleaned in an attempt to eliminate all visible evidence. But here's where science becomes irrefutable. Those blood samples were collected, extracted, and sent for DNA analysis. The process took months, but the results came back definitive. The DNA extracted from the blood traces in Jack's bedroom matched Jack Sullivan's genetic profile, obtained from his toothbrush and other personal items. The DNA from the blood in Lily's bathroom matched Lily Sullivan's profile. There is now scientific proof that both children bled significantly inside that house. Their blood was shed in their own home, in the places where they should have been safest. Now think about what that means. These children experienced trauma severe enough to cause substantial bleeding. Yet there are no medical records showing either child received treatment for injuries around that time. No emergency room visits. No calls to doctors. No reports to school nurses about wounds requiring attention. If your child is bleeding enough to leave traces across multiple surfaces, you seek medical help. Unless you're responsible for those injuries. Unless seeking help means facing questions you can't answer. Unless by the time the bleeding occurred, medical help was no longer relevant. Before we continue with the devastating forensic evidence that investigators uncovered, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we're covering developments in cases like this as they happen. What time is it where you're watching from? Drop it in the comments. And share this video because Lily and Jack's story needs to be heard. Their case demands attention until justice is finally served. When investigators initially processed the Sullivan property on May 2 and in the days following the disappearance, they collected hundreds of samples from various locations around the yard. Soil samples from different areas. Swabs from surfaces inside the house. Fibers from carpets and furniture. All of this material was sent to forensic laboratories for detailed analysis. Some results came back relatively quickly, but other tests required months of painstaking work by specialists using advanced techniques. Those long-awaited results have finally returned, and what they reveal is deeply incriminating. Forensic soil scientists examined samples taken from multiple locations on the property, looking for anomalies that might indicate disturbance or the presence of decomposing organic material. What they found in 3 specific locations is extremely concerning. The soil showed chemical signatures consistent with human decomposition. Elevated levels of nitrogen compounds that occur when tissue breaks down. Changes in pH levels that indicate biological decay. Most significantly, the presence of adipocere, a waxy substance that forms when body fats decompose under certain conditions. The chemical profile matches exactly what you'd expect to find in soil where human remains had been present, even if those remains had since been removed. These findings weren't from random locations scattered across the property. The 3 spots where decomposition markers were detected form a pattern that investigators find highly significant. One location is near the tree line at the edge of the property, approximately where a neighbor reported seeing Daniel standing and looking into the woods on the morning of May 2. Another location is behind an outbuilding on the property, an area that wouldn't be easily visible from the road or neighboring houses. The third location is in a section of the yard that's somewhat secluded behind bushes and not readily visible from the main house. All 3 locations are places where bodies could have been temporarily placed or buried without being easily observed by anyone passing by. What makes these soil findings even more significant is the depth at which the decomposition markers were found. The chemical signatures weren't just present on the surface, but extended down 12 to 18 inches into the soil at each location. This suggests that whatever decomposed there was buried, at least temporarily, at a shallow depth. The pattern is entirely consistent with bodies being buried quickly in shallow graves, left there for a period of hours or perhaps a day or 2, and then removed and relocated to a more permanent location. This would explain why extensive searches of the property didn't find remains. They weren't there anymore by the time those searches began. Cell phone location data doesn't lie. It's one of the most reliable forms of evidence in modern investigations because phones constantly communicate with cell towers, creating a digital record of movement that's nearly impossible to fake or explain away. When investigators obtained records for Daniel Martell's phone, what they found demolished his alibi and proved he'd been lying about his whereabouts during the most critical hours of this case. Daniel had always claimed he was home on the property from the evening of May 1 through the morning when the 911 call was made. He admitted to making a trip to a gas station around 11:15 p.m. on May 1, but insisted he returned home and stayed there for the rest of the night and into the morning. The cell phone data tells a completely different story. His phone shows him leaving the property around 11:15 p.m., consistent with the gas station trip. But the data also shows his phone was near a remote wooded area approximately 10 kilometers from the Sullivan property between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m. on May 2. He was in that location for approximately 15 to 20 minutes before the phone shows him returning to the property. When confronted with this data, Daniel initially claimed his phone must have been malfunctioning or that the cell tower information must be wrong. But cell phone location data triangulated from multiple towers is highly reliable. The phone was in that wooded location because Daniel was in that wooded location. The only question is what he was doing there at 5:30 in the morning, and the answer becomes clear when you consider what else investigators discovered. A delivery driver who regularly services the area came forward with information that corroborates the cell phone data. This driver makes early morning deliveries and was in the area around 5:45 a.m. on May 2. He reported seeing a truck matching the description of Daniel's vehicle pulled off to the side of a rural road near a densely forested area. When investigators showed him photos, he confirmed it was the same truck. He also said the person he saw standing near the vehicle looked similar to Daniel, though he couldn't be completely certain from the distance. But here's what makes this witness account so compelling. The driver said the person appeared to be doing something in the truck bed, leaning over it as if placing or removing something. Then the person walked toward the tree line carrying what might have been a bag or bundle, though the driver couldn't be certain in the early morning light. The person was out of sight for several minutes, then returned to the truck without carrying anything visible. This description is entirely consistent with someone disposing of remains or evidence in the woods. Someone making a trip they hoped no one would witness, in the pre-dawn darkness when they thought the rural roads would be empty. Daniel's truck became a focal point of the investigation for good reason. Neighbors had reported hearing a vehicle engine running at unusual hours on the night of May 1st and early morning of May 2nd. The cell phone data placed Daniel and his truck in that remote wooded area during a critical time window. But it was the forensic analysis of the truck itself that would provide some of the most damning evidence in this entire case. Cadaver dogs were brought in to examine the vehicle. These are highly trained animals capable of detecting the scent of human decomposition even when remains have been removed and surfaces have been cleaned. When the dogs were given access to Daniel's truck, they showed intense interest in the truck bed. Their behavior indicated they were detecting decomposition scent, the unmistakable signature that human remains had been present in that space. Investigators collected samples from various surfaces in the truck bed and sent them for DNA analysis. The results show the presence of DNA from both Lily and Jack in areas of the truck bed that wouldn't have normal contact with passengers. It was found in crevices and seams where biological material could seep and remain even after cleaning attempts. The DNA was mixed with soil that forensic analysis matched to the composition of soil from the Sullivan property. Most significantly, the DNA showed degradation patterns consistent with it coming from biological material that had been deceased for some time rather than from living individuals. This is strong scientific evidence that bodies were transported in that truck. Trace evidence found in the truck bed included something else that places the vehicle at a specific location. Plant material, leaves and small twigs from tree species that are common in the wooded area where the truck was spotted by the delivery driver, but that don't grow on the Sullivan property itself. This forensic botanical evidence corroborates the witness account and the cell phone data. Daniel's truck was in those woods. The plant material was found mixed with the soil and DNA evidence, suggesting it all arrived in the truck bed during the same trip. The picture that emerges is clear and horrifying. Something happened to Lily and Jack inside that house on the night of May 1st. Their blood was shed in their bedrooms and bathroom. Their bodies were temporarily placed in shallow graves at 3 locations on the property where decomposition began. Then, in the pre-dawn hours of May 2nd, those bodies were transported in Daniel's truck to a remote wooded area and disposed of in a location where they still haven't been found despite extensive searches. Every piece of evidence points to this conclusion. The forensic science doesn't speculate. It documents what happened with cold, irrefutable facts. After 7 months of painstaking investigation, after following every lead and analyzing every piece of evidence, the case against Daniel Martell and Malia Brooks Murray has reached a critical threshold. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have built something that seemed impossible in those early days when the children first vanished. A comprehensive case based on forensic evidence, witness testimony, digital records, and scientific analysis that tells the story of what happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan even without recovered remains. Prosecutors are now reviewing all of this evidence with one question in mind: is it strong enough to secure convictions? Cases without recovered bodies are always challenging. Defense attorneys will argue that without remains, you can't prove the children are dead. They'll suggest alternative explanations, create doubt wherever possible, argue that suspicion isn't the same as proof. But legal experts believe the evidence in this case has reached the point where charges are not just possible, but likely imminent. The forensic soil analysis proving decomposition occurred. The DNA evidence from cleaned blood inside the house. The cell phone data destroying alibis. The witness testimony corroborating key facts. The digital searches showing planning and guilty knowledge. When you combine all of these elements, the circumstantial evidence becomes overwhelming. The community that rallied to search for these children 7 months ago is now waiting for a different kind of resolution. People want to see Daniel Martell and Malia Brooks Murray held accountable. They want justice for 2 innocent children who were failed by the adults responsible for protecting them. Vigils continue. Memorials remain. The faces of Lily and Jack Sullivan look out from posters and social media profiles, reminding everyone that these weren't just names in a news story. They were real children who deserved safety, love, and a future that was stolen from them. For the biological father, Cody Sullivan, the emerging evidence brings devastating confirmation of what he feared from the beginning. Despite his own past struggles that led to losing parental rights, he never wanted anything but safety for his children. Now he faces the horrible reality that they suffered and died while in someone else's care. He's committed to attending every court proceeding once charges are filed, to being present as the system finally delivers the justice Lily and Jack never received in life. What do you think about this evidence? Does it prove what happened to Lily and Jack? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know what's the weather like where you are today. If this case matters to you, subscribe to the Case Files Collective right now and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update as this moves toward prosecution. Hit that like button and share this video because these children's story deserves to be heard until justice is finally served.